You can't save everything, Daniel, she said, blood on her knuckles and snow in her hair. I thought she meant the dog. Under the blinding Aspen winter sun, one blind date, one rescued husky, and one anonymous message about my dead wife pulled me into a war I never saw coming, a war that almost cost my son the last piece of his laughter. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, have you ever built walls around your heart after losing someone? And did you ever dare to open them again? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful emotional stories. Let's begin. The thing about grief is that it teaches you discipline. Not the noble kind people praise in speeches, but the cold, private kind, where you learn how to breathe without feeling, how to keep your voice steady while your son watches you like a weather report. 3 years after cancer took Maggie, I'd built my life into something that couldn't collapse. Meetings. Numbers. Schedules. Silence. Even my penthouse in Aspen felt designed to keep emotion out, glass, steel, perfect views of mountains that didn't care if you were hurting. Oliver did care. He was 9, and he had stopped laughing the way kids are supposed to laugh. Not the polite little sound adults earn from him at school events, real laughter. The kind that grabs the whole body and doesn't ask permission. My sister-in-law, Paige, had started looking at me like I was the one who needed rescuing. She called it help. I called it interference. But on a Tuesday evening in December, she talked me into a blind date at a cafe called the Ridgeline. I arrived early. Of course I did. Control was my religion now. I sat with my back to the wall, a habit left over from boardrooms and the kind of business that teaches you to read exits. I ordered coffee I didn't want and watched snow press itself against the windows like the whole town was inside a shaken snow globe. At 6:12, I checked my watch. At 6:15, I decided I'd leave. At 6:20, the door flew open, and the winter rushed in. She stood in the doorway like she'd been chased by something bigger than weather. Soaked hair. Torn sleeve. A scrape across her knuckles, red and raw. Boots caked with ice. And in her eyes, that look people have right after they've done something frightening and haven't had time to decide whether to be proud or terrified. She spotted me, inhaled, and walked straight over. "Daniel Whitaker?" she asked, breathing hard. "Yes. I'm Hannah. I'm so sorry." She looked down at herself, like she'd only just noticed the state of her coat. "I know how this looks. You look like you fought a snowbank and lost," I said before I could stop myself. To my surprise, she laughed, a short, startled sound, like it escaped her. "Close," she said, sliding into the seat. There was a husky. I blinked. A husky. Down by Monarch Street. I was crossing the pedestrian bridge and heard this crying sound. Not a bark. Not a whine. Like pain with a voice. She held up her hand. The scrape was ugly. "I called animal control," she continued. "They said 40 minutes. Maybe longer with the weather. And you didn't wait." Hannah's gaze didn't move. "Some things can't wait for convenience." That sentence hit me harder than it should have. She asked for hot tea and water, then explained, fast, practical, like she was giving a report after a rescue mission. A section of old chain-link fence had collapsed. The husky's hind leg got caught on an icy shelf. Hannah climbed over the railing, slid down the embankment, and sat with him until she could free him. "I named him Ranger," she said quietly, wrapping both hands around the mug like it was a heater for more than her fingers. "I don't know why. He just needed a name." I stared at her torn sleeve, the scrape, the way she carried urgency like a normal accessory. And I realized this wasn't going to be polite small talk about hobbies and Aspen weather. "What do you do?" she asked. I said the title the way I always did, like armor. "CEO. Whitaker Development Group." She nodded like I'd told her I repaired dishwashers. And before that? She asked. That question, before that, caught me off guard. Most people stopped at the title. It was the whole point of saying it. I worked construction, I admitted. My father's company. We built foundations. Literally. Hannah's expression softened. That explains why you sit like you're guarding the room. I almost smiled. Almost. We talked for 2 hours. I learned she was a veterinary technician at Ridgeview Animal Rescue, and that she volunteered more hours than she got paid. She'd grown up bouncing through foster homes across Colorado. Animals, she said, were honest. Pain in an animal was uncomplicated, you could do something about it. Then she asked about Oliver. I opened my mouth to give one of my practiced answers. He's fine. He's resilient. Kids adapt. But Hannah's eyes were steady, not nosy, just real. So I told the truth. He's quiet, I said. It's like the volume got turned down inside him. He does what he's supposed to do. But the light isn't the same. Hannah listened like she wasn't thinking about what to say next. Like she was just present. You know what I've learned about grieving animals? She asked. The ones that shut down the most completely are usually the ones who loved the hardest. That landed in my chest with a slow, heavy certainty. You can't protect someone from pain, she added, by protecting them from love. For a moment, I saw Oliver at 6 years old, running through our hallway in socks, slamming into doorframes because slowing down seemed like an insult to joy. And I felt something, sharp and unwanted, behind my ribs. Hannah mentioned 7 puppies that had arrived at Ridgeview in a box behind a gas station, left there during the blizzard like garbage. Without thinking, I heard myself say, could I bring Oliver? She studied me. Not judging. Measuring. The shelter isn't a field trip, she said. Some of the animals are scared. Recovering. It takes steadiness. He has that, I said. Then, quieter, probably more than I do. Hannah nodded once. Sunday morning. Outside, snow drifted past the window in slow, thick flakes. And I realized I had just made a plan that involved getting up early on a weekend, driving into an industrial district in winter, and walking into a building that smelled like antiseptic and hope. When I drove home, I caught myself feeling something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Not happiness. Not peace. Something simpler. Interest. As if the story wasn't over yet. And as I pulled into my garage, my phone buzzed with a notification from the security team at my company. Unauthorized access attempt, Whitaker Foundation portal. I stared at the screen. Then another message came in, unknown number, no name. Some things can't wait for convenience, Daniel. Stop digging where you don't belong. My hands went cold. Because only one person had said that sentence to me tonight. And she was sitting in a warm cafe, sipping tea, completely unaware, unless she wasn't. Sunday morning in Aspen looks innocent. The kind of clean, bright winter day that tricks tourists into thinking cold is romantic. Snow glittering. Blue sky. Mountains sharp as glass. But innocence is a costume. I'd learned that in business. I'd learned it again in grief. Oliver sat in the passenger seat, hood up, hands tucked into his coat pockets. He didn't complain. He didn't ask questions. He was so well behaved it hurt. You okay? I asked as we drove. I'm fine, he said automatically. The same answer I'd been giving the world for 3 years. Ridgeview Animal Rescue wasn't in the postcard part of town. It sat on the edge of the industrial district, corrugated metal, chain-link fences, heaters humming like old machines. The sign out front was hand-painted and chipped, as if the building itself had been through things and kept showing up anyway. Hannah met us by the side entrance. Different from the cafe, work clothes, hair pulled back, boots meant for messes. She looked comfortable. Like this place fit her bones. She crouched slightly so she was eye level with Oliver, not making a show of it. "Hi, Oliver," she said gently. "Ever been around a lot of animals at once?" He shook his head. "Okay. 3 rules." She held up a finger. "Move slowly. No sudden sounds. Some of these animals have had confusing lives recently." Second finger. "If an animal turns away, it needs space. We respect that without taking it personally." Third finger, then her mouth twitched like she was letting herself be soft for a second. "The puppies in the East Room don't have those concerns. They will absolutely take it personally if you don't pet them." Oliver's lips almost lifted. Almost. Inside, the shelter smelled like antiseptic and bedding and something warmer under it, coffee and sawdust and effort. Volunteers moved with quiet purpose. Dogs barked. Cats watched like tiny judgmental librarians. I caught myself scanning the place the way I'd scan a construction site. Flickering lights in one corridor. HVAC unit rattling. A heater patched with duct tape. Folding tables held together with zip ties. My brain automatically started calculating cost, time, logistics. Then Oliver stepped into the East Room. 7 puppies slept in a tangled pile, caramel-colored and ridiculous, like someone had poured life into a blanket. Oliver crouched by the pen, careful and silent. One puppy woke up, blinked at him like an old soul in a tiny body, and began climbing over its siblings with tragic determination. It wobbled. Fell. Got up like falling didn't matter. It reached Oliver's hand, sniffed, then rested its chin on his fingers and closed its eyes. And my son's face, my quiet, guarded boy, changed. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't sob. He just opened, like a door that had been stuck finally moved. His eyes filled. He exhaled. His shoulders dropped. And then, softly, as if the sound surprised him too, Oliver laughed. It was small, but it was real. Something in my chest cracked, ice breaking, not loudly, but deep. Hannah stood behind me, not talking, letting it happen without stealing it. That's when I noticed a small black dome in the corner of the ceiling. A camera. I frowned. That new? Hannah glanced up, her brow tightening. No. That's weird. That wasn't there last month. My stomach tightened. You have surveillance? We have one outside, by the intake door. That's it. She walked toward the corner, squinting. This one's not even plugged into our system. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. Unknown number again. Smile for the camera. I didn't tell Hannah. Not yet. Because I needed to know if she was part of this, or if she was being used. We kept moving through the shelter. Oliver stayed near the puppies like they were oxygen. In the older dog corridor, an elderly German shepherd lay on an orthopedic mat, muzzle gray, eyes amber and tired. Hannah's voice softened. That's Ranger. I froze. The husky? I asked. No. She shook her head. The husky from the bridge is still at the clinic. This is another Ranger. I know it's confusing. She sighed. The name stuck in my head that night, and then this old guy came in. It fit him too. The German shepherd lifted his head slightly, looked at me like he'd seen promises before and learned to stop believing. He looks like someone who's still here, I murmured before I could stop myself. Hannah's gaze slid to me. Some days that's enough. We were halfway through refilling water stations when the trouble arrived. A man stormed through the front door, voice loud enough to echo down the hallway. I want my dog back. He wore a heavy work jacket, face red with anger, or panic, I couldn't tell yet. The black lab, he snapped. I surrendered him 2 weeks ago. I changed my mind. The volunteer at the desk froze. Hannah stepped forward. What she did next was one of the calmest, strongest things I'd ever watched. She didn't argue. Didn't escalate. She just met him like she believed he was human, not a threat. "Tell me about him," she said. The man blinked like he'd expected a fight. "Your dog," Hannah repeated. "What's his name?" "Bear," he muttered. "How long have you had him?" 6 years. His jaw clenched. "He was my wife's. She left. And I thought I couldn't handle Bear being around. Reminded me of," he swallowed hard. "But I was wrong." Hannah nodded slowly. "I understand." She explained the process, hold periods, paperwork, reunification requests, without judgment. She offered resources. A conversation. A path back. The man who came in ready to explode sat down quietly, like he'd run out of fuel. When he left, I found Hannah in the supply room stacking food bins with steady hands. "You've done that before," I said. "Surrenders happen for a lot of reasons," she replied. "Most of them are pain, not cruelty." Then she looked at me, like she could see right through my tailored coat and polished watch. "If you assume the worst, you lose the dog and the person," she said. "If you assume the best, sometimes you save both." That should have been the whole lesson of the day. But when Oliver and I walked back to the car, a folded paper was tucked under my windshield wiper. No envelope. No name. Just a single sentence printed in clean, corporate font. "Maggie didn't die the way you think she did." I stood in the cold, staring at the words until my vision blurred. Oliver tugged my sleeve. "Dad?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, buddy," I said, forcing my voice steady. "I'm here." And in my pocket, my phone buzzed again. "Stop bringing your son to Ridgeview, Daniel. Or he'll lose more than laughter." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark living room while Aspen glittered outside like nothing bad could ever happen here. Oliver's door stayed closed down the hall. His breathing was steady. Safe. I kept telling myself that word. Safe. I'd built an entire empire around controlling risk. But grief doesn't respond to strategy, and fear doesn't care how successful you are. At 2:17 a.m., I opened a locked folder on my laptop: medical documents, oncology bills, hospice schedules. Maggie's death had been slow. Certain. Verified by every clinical line item I'd forced myself to read as if facts could replace pain. So why did that sentence under my windshield wiper make my stomach drop? Because it wasn't just a threat. It was aimed at something I'd avoided for 3 years. The guilt. In the last month of Maggie's life, there had been a trial drug option. Experimental. A long shot. Maggie had asked me to consider it. I said no. Not because I didn't love her. Because I was terrified of false hope. Terrified of watching her suffer more. Terrified of losing control. And the look she gave me when I said no, quiet, tired, accepting, had haunted me ever since. At 6:30 a.m., I got out of bed, dressed, and drove to Summit Creek Clinic, the overnight vet Hannah mentioned. Snow creaked under my tires. The world still looked harmless. Like a painting. Inside the clinic, the receptionist recognized my name and stiffened, polite but alert. I'd seen that reaction before. People either leaned in when they heard CEO or they backed away. "I'm here about the husky," I said. Hannah brought him in. The receptionist's eyes narrowed slightly. "Atlas." My breath caught. "His name is Atlas?" "Yes." She clicked something on her screen. "He came in with a microchip. Owner information is missing." The chip number is registered, but the account was wiped. Like someone scrubbed it. Scrubbed. That was a word I understood. Can I see him? She hesitated, then nodded. Just a moment. When Atlas limped into the exam room, I saw the bruising along his hind leg, the swelling. But what made my skin prickle wasn't the injury. It was the collar still around his neck. Not a regular collar. A thick black one with a metal plate attached, like a tag had been removed. Like someone didn't want a name connected to him. The vet walked in behind him, an older woman with calm eyes. "Hannah called ahead," she said. "She said you might come." "Did she mention threats?" I asked carefully. The vet's mouth tightened. "No. But she did say something was off. That the fence where Atlas was stuck looked cut. Cut. Not rusted. Not broken by weather. Cut." My phone buzzed. "Unknown number, again. You're not as smart as you think you are. Go back to your spreadsheets." The vet noticed my expression. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "Just tired." I wasn't tired. I was being hunted. I drove straight to Ridgeview. Hannah was in the kennel corridor, giving meds to an older pit mix. When she saw my face, her hands stopped moving. "What happened?" she asked quietly. I handed her the paper. She read it once. Twice. Her eyes lifted to mine, steady but sharpened. "This isn't funny," she said. "I know," I replied. "And I got a message last night telling me to stop bringing Oliver here." For the first time since I'd met her, Hannah looked angry. Not dramatic anger. The controlled kind that means someone has crossed a line. "I've been getting weird calls too," she admitted. Silent breathing. Then they hang up. "Why?" I asked. Hannah looked down at Atlas through the kennel gate. The husky's eyes followed her like he trusted her already. "Because Ridgeview sits on land someone wants," she said quietly. My stomach sank. "What?" She nodded toward the windows, toward the industrial lots beyond. "This whole block is about to be redeveloped. There's been talk for months. A buyer. A big one." I felt cold wash over me. "Who?" I asked, already knowing the answer I didn't want. Hannah hesitated. "Whitaker Development." My throat went dry. "That's impossible," I whispered. But I knew it wasn't. Because my company had a confidential acquisition plan for a new mixed-use resort expansion on the edge of town. Luxury retail. Condos. Heated sidewalks. The kind of project that made investors drool. And the land included the shelter. I'd signed preliminary approvals. I hadn't read the full property list. I'd trusted my team. Trusted the machine. Hannah's voice was quiet, but it hit like a hammer. "Daniel," she said, "if your company is involved, someone might think you're the problem." "I didn't know," I said, and the word sounded weak even to me. She studied my face like she was deciding whether to believe the man or the title. Then she nodded once. "Okay," she said. "Then you'll help me stop it." That's when a volunteer ran into the corridor, breathless. "Hannah, someone's outside. They're putting flyers on cars." We went out into the parking lot. A man in a hooded jacket was moving fast, slipping papers under windshield wipers. When he saw us, he bolted. I ran. Not like a CEO. Like a father who'd been warned. The man turned the corner by the dumpsters and disappeared into the snow. But I reached the nearest flyer and read the headline in bold letters. "Whitaker CEO uses animal shelter for PR scam, rescue workers exploited." Below it, a blurry photo of Oliver petting the puppy. My son. Used as a weapon. I felt my hands shake. Hannah's jaw tightened. "They're going to destroy us," she said softly. "They're going to turn kindness into a scandal." I stared at the flyer until the ink seemed to bleed. "No," I said, voice low. "They're going to try." Then I looked at Hannah. "And I'm done letting fear decide what's true." I didn't go to the office that day. I went home, knelt in front of Oliver, and told him the truth, careful truth, father truth. "Someone is being mean to the shelter," I said. "And they're using pictures to make it look bad." Oliver's brow furrowed. "Why?" "Because some people want the shelter to go away," I said. "And when people want something badly enough, they sometimes lie." He stared at me for a long moment. "Did Mom go away?" he asked quietly. The question hit me so hard I almost stopped breathing. Maggie hadn't gone away. She'd been taken, slowly, painfully, unfairly. But Oliver's mind had been trying to make sense of absence for 3 years, and I realized something shameful. I'd let him do it alone. I sat beside him on his bed. "No," I said, voice breaking. "Your mom didn't go away. She fought. And she loved you. And she stayed as long as she could." Oliver swallowed. "Did you stay?" The room went silent. That was the real question. Not about Maggie. About me. I took a shaky breath. I was there, I admitted. But I wasn't, the way I should have been. I was scared. And I thought being strong meant being controlled. Oliver looked down at his hands. "I don't like when you're cold." "Neither did I, me neither," I whispered. That night, I called my legal counsel and asked for the full acquisition file on the redevelopment project. Every memo. Every name. Every contractor. At midnight, I found the line that made my blood run colder than Aspen winter. Security subcontract, Willard Risk Solutions. Willard. The same last name as the man who came to Ridgeview demanding his dog back. Gary Willard. Coincidence is a fairy tale adults tell themselves. I dug deeper. Willard Risk Solutions had been contracted for site readiness, community pressure mitigation, and reputational countermeasures. In plain English. Intimidation. Smear campaigns. Coercion. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen until my vision blurred. My company wasn't just buying land. It was hiring people to crush anything that stood in the way. And someone had decided the easiest way to control me was to use Maggie's memory like a knife. Because buried deeper in the file was a medical partnership sponsor list, companies that had funded certain oncology programs in Denver. One of them was a shell entity I recognized from an old internal audit. A shell that traced back to a competitor I'd sued years ago. A competitor who'd hated Maggie because she'd spoken up at a charity gala about unethical development practices. A competitor who'd once told me, smiling politely, "Careful. Your wife makes enemies." I closed my laptop and sat in the dark. Hannah was right. They were turning kindness into a scandal. But they were also doing something worse. They were trying to make me question my wife's death. To make me hesitate. To keep me quiet. The next morning, I drove to Ridgeview and found Hannah in the break room, coffee untouched. "I pulled the file," I said. She looked up, eyes tired. "And?" I slid the printed pages across the table. She read the contractor name and went still. "Willard," she whispered. "You know him?" I asked. Hannah's lips pressed together. "He used to donate here. Small amounts. Always wanted photos. Always wanted credit. Then he got angry when we wouldn't let him use the shelter like a billboard." Her gaze lifted to mine. "He's the kind of man who thinks doing good is a transaction," she said. "If he doesn't get what he wants, he punishes you for it." I nodded slowly. I'm going to blow this open, I said. Hannah's eyes widened slightly. Daniel, if you do that. I know, I said. My board will try to remove me. Investors will panic. The press will eat it alive. And the people threatening you, she added quietly. I swallowed. Yes, I admitted. Them too. She stared at me for a long moment, then reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, steady. You don't have to do it alone, she said. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something like partnership, not corporate, not strategic. Human. That afternoon, we held a volunteer meeting at Ridgeview. I stood in front of people who made minimum wage and still showed up in snowstorms to clean kennels. People who had no penthouse, no security team, no power, except the kind that comes from caring. I'm Daniel Whitaker, I said, voice tight. And I owe you the truth. I told them about the acquisition. The smear campaign. The intimidation contractor. I told them I hadn't known. Then I told them what I was going to do. I'm canceling the deal, I said. And I'm filing an internal whistleblower report with full documentation. Public. A murmur rippled through the room. One volunteer raised a hand. They'll come after you. I nodded. Probably. Another voice, older, calm, why would you risk everything for us? I looked toward the kennel corridor, where Oliver was sitting on the floor with Atlas, letting the husky lean against him like the world wasn't dangerous. And I realized my answer wasn't noble. It was simple. Because my son laughed here, I said, voice breaking. And because kindness shouldn't lose just because cruelty has money. Hannah's eyes shone. She looked away quickly, like she hated being seen too clearly. That night, as I uploaded the documents to a secure server for my attorney, my phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number. Final warning. Drop it, or Oliver will remember this winter for the wrong reason. I stared at the message. Then I typed back, hands steady. He already remembers. He remembers who showed up. So do I. The truth doesn't arrive like thunder. Sometimes it arrives like paperwork. 3 days after I filed the report, my board called an emergency meeting. They used words like fiduciary duty and shareholder confidence. They said I was emotionally compromised. They weren't wrong. But not the way they meant. I was compromised by something stronger than fear. I was compromised by honesty. The local paper published the story first, how Ridgeview had been targeted, how intimidation contractors were used, how photos of a grieving child were weaponized to kill public sympathy. Then the Denver outlets picked it up. Then national. My stock dipped. Investors panicked. My phone rang non-stop. But something else happened too. Donations poured in. Volunteers doubled. A retired HVAC technician showed up at Ridgeview with tools and said, I saw what they did. Let me fix what I can. A construction crew offered free labor for repairs. People, strangers, chose kindness when given the chance. Hannah didn't celebrate. She just kept working. Feeding. Cleaning. Taking calls. Saving what could be saved. Because that's who she was. On the 4th day, someone drove a truck into Ridgeview's fence overnight and tore a section down. They didn't steal anything. They just wanted to remind us they could. I arrived at dawn, before the sun fully rose, and found Hannah standing in the snow, staring at the broken chain link. Her blonde hair was pulled back, cheeks pink with cold, eyes tired in a way that looked familiar. It looked like grief. You okay? I asked softly. Hannah didn't turn. I'm angry, she admitted. Me too, I said. She finally faced me. I've spent my whole life learning how to survive people like this, she said. And I still hate that they exist. I nodded slowly. So do I. We stood in silence while volunteers began repairing the fence with temporary panels. Then Oliver ran up, breathless, cheeks flushed. "Dad," he said. "Atlas, he did the thing again." "The thing?" I asked, confused. Oliver grabbed my sleeve and pulled me toward the kennel corridor. Atlas, husky Atlas, leg bandaged, eyes clearer now, was sitting calmly, tail thumping once against the floor. Oliver crouched, held out his hand, and Atlas leaned forward and licked Oliver's face. Oliver laughed, loud and helpless and real. The sound echoed down the corridor like a promise. Hannah's hand flew to her mouth. And in that moment, I realized what this whole battle was really about. Not land. Not money. Not reputation. Not even revenge. It was about whether love was worth the risk again. That afternoon, my foundation approved an emergency grant to Ridgeview, facility upgrades, staff support, medical supply partnerships, legal protection. Quietly, without branding it with my name like a trophy. Hannah protested once. "No strings," I said. "No photo ops. No speeches. Just, help." She stared at me like she didn't know what to do with a gift that didn't demand anything back. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." A week later, Atlas came home with us. Oliver helped carry his new bed into the living room like it was sacred cargo. Atlas walked through my penthouse carefully, sniffing corners with the gravity of a creature who'd been disappointed enough times to stop expecting warmth. Oliver sat on the floor beside him, not forcing affection, just being present. Hannah stood in my doorway, hands shoved into her coat pockets, eyes shining in the soft light. "I didn't think you'd actually do it," she admitted. "Adopt a dog?" I asked. "Choose this," she said. "Choose risk." I looked at Oliver, at Atlas settling onto the bed with a long exhale, like something finally believed the cold was over. Then I looked at Hannah. "You once told me some things can't wait for convenience," I said quietly. Her breath caught, almost like she knew what was coming but still wasn't ready. That night, after Oliver fell asleep, peacefully, finally, the way he used to before grief rewired our home, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window watching the mountains hold their indifferent silence. Atlas slept behind me. The penthouse was warm. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel like I was managing absence. I felt present. I picked up my phone and typed Hannah a message. "You once said some things can't wait for convenience. I'm done waiting." I hit send. No grand declaration. No dramatic soundtrack. Just a man who finally understood that being brave wasn't about never feeling fear. It was about choosing love anyway. And behind me, Atlas shifted in his sleep and let out a slow, settling breath. The sound of something that had finally come in from the cold. Thanks for watching. If this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe for more unforgettable stories about love, resilience, and second chances.